I'm Karen Colligan, and welcome to the Let's Talk Leadership podcast. So, why do I care about leadership? As the founder of PeopleThink, and in my tenure as a leader, as a consultant, and as a coach, I've certainly seen my share of very good leaders and my share of very bad leaders. And I thought it'd be great to share the wisdom from the very good leaders. Hence, the Let's Talk Leadership podcast. You're going to hear from a variety of leaders who are in a variety of roles, sharing their leadership expertise by answering the same 6 questions. Every single leader is unique in their style and approach, and we want to capture that uniqueness and provide you, the listener, with a diverse way of looking at leadership. So let's get moving and talk to our next leadership guest. In this episode, I'm thrilled to be speaking to Dr. Jean Oursler, CEO of the Caveman Brain. We're going to hear all about Jean's approach to leadership. And so, Dr. Jean, welcome and thank you for being with us today.
Thank you so much. I'm so glad to be on your podcast. Karen, you are just a delight and a pleasure and such an expert. I'm just so honored to be with you and your listeners today.
Great. Well, thank you so much. So before we get going into the 6 questions, Dr. Jean, tell us a little bit about who you are and give us a snapshot of the Caveman Brain.
Okay, so yeah, I'm happy to tell you about Caveman Brain. So the reason why I'm Dr. Jean, the Results Queen, is because my clients crowned me the Results Queen because I'm all about getting results for my clients at the end of the day. And the reason why I'm a Dr. Jean is because I have a PhD in business psychology, and my EO colleagues felt that I should be Dr. Jean. So that's how I became Dr. Jean, the Results Queen. And yes, the Results Queen has a little circle R like Coca-Cola because I figured I should register mark it because it's an asset. Caveman Brain comes from the fact that I have been a business owner for a very long period of time. We are a one-stop consulting and coaching shop around what we call the triple S success formula. So around strategy, sales, structure, which equals success. And I was not doing well in my own company in those 3 areas. So I hired 4 coaches. One of them happened to be a Harvard neuroscientist, where I learned all about the brain and what it was doing to inhibit me from being more strategic and growing my company. So now that came into Caveman Brain because I can't say amygdala all the time. And so we work with can't, my dyslexia, my ADHD. So Caveman Brain is a philosophy, it's a framework, and it's a system that helps business owners grow their business to the areas where they want to grow. That's it.
Nice. I love that.
Thanks.
Love that. Good. All righty. So now that we know a little bit about you, so let's get into the 6 questions. So
Yes, ma'am.
the first one, we know everybody's unique from a leadership perspective. And we also know that everyone defines leadership very, very specifically to who they are. So let us know, how do you define leadership, Dr. Jean?
So, leadership, yeah, like as I chuckle around that, because it's interesting. Leadership in some ways is what we would call a non-action action word, meaning that when I say leadership, it means something to me and I know what it means, but it means something very different to you. And we both then operate from different places. And to me as a leader, I need to be able to know exactly who I am. I need to know exactly what my strengths and weaknesses are. And I need to be able to have those conversations in order for all of the people that work with me to grow and be able to use their unique abilities to be successful. Because if they're using their unique abilities, they're going to be happy, they're going to be engaged, they're going to be creative, and that's going to create success for them, which will create success for my organization and my clients. So I really think it's important as a leader that you have to understand that you are the leader.
Yes.
And I often say I'm the alpha dog of the alpha dogs, is what I tell people. I am, right?
Yeah.
However, I think that we have to understand why we want to be a leader, what we
Yes.
stand for as a leader. So my mission is to leave you better than I found you. That's my
Mhm.
mission. And that's what I bring to everything. And then as a leader, what are we doing to better all the people that we interact in? And I think a lot of times as leaders, we're all thinking about ourselves.
Yeah.
And we practice the golden rule of treat others the way we want to be treated. But the reality is in leadership, we have to learn to meet people where they're at. And
Mhm.
we have to help them grow from that point. What I say to people is that in your stable, there are lots of different types, or in your zoo, there's lots of different types of animals. There's lots of different, so a horse can't be a lion, right? And the lion can't be the dog, and the dog can't be the monkey. And the fact is, you really have to understand who your people are and how do you get the best of them and how do they fit into your team. And if they don't fit in your team, because that's the other thing is that we grow a lot. And it's so interesting because I just spoke to 2 companies where It was like, we've grown a lot and we don't do the way things we used to. Can we get our people to do that? And the fact is that we have to help them come with us. That's very important. And we have to serve them because that makes it, but I don't want to be a servant leader. I'm serving them. I'm a serving leader, serving them
Mhm.
what they need so that they can grow with me and they can grow as part of me. But at the same time, I've got to know who I am so I can tell them how to work with me. Every leader should have an operating manual that they hand to their team that says, this is how I operate.
Yes. Yes.
And then this is how I expect all of you to operate. And we
Yes.
hold each other accountable to that.
Yeah, and I do a lot of leadership coaching and leadership work, and I'm always talking about how stuff runs downhill
Mhm.
when you're looking at a leader, and people are always looking, saying, "What's going on?" And they take your emotion on, they take your style on, and why, as you just indicated, it's so important for leaders to be able to articulate who they are as a leader, and then be able to communicate it in a way that their people will get it, because it changes, it shifts, and again, as you said, based on your audience. So that
Yeah.
self-awareness piece is huge, no question.
Yeah, and I communicate that, and it's interesting. We do a lot of assessment work within our own organization, so we all understand each other, and then we use that common language.
Yes.
So, like, I'm a quick start, and my practice manager is a high fact finder. So it's like, well, why are we doing this?
Yeah.
Right?
Yes.
So you got to be able to. You have to really. There's a lot of self-awareness in leadership that people aren't. They people don't do the work
Right.
and they get promoted and then
Yes.
right and then and like you took your best salesperson and now they're the sales manager. Well,
Yes.
it doesn't
Oh,
necessarily
don't get me started
that
on
may not
that.
necessarily be the best way of being.
Yes.
And sometimes we use what we grew up with, or like things from our
Yes,
parents,
of
our culture,
course.
our life
Yeah.
experiences to be
Yeah.
leaders, and that doesn't necessarily work.
No, leadership is a set of competencies. There's no question. So if you're a great salesperson, it has no correlation that you're going to be a great sales leader. So
True.
that's why we do keep it real leadership, because it's all about being competent and confident going into your leadership.
I love
So
that.
we could digress, no question. Don't get me
Yes, we could.
started on that around leadership.
Okay, well, we won't. I'll stop. I'll stop.
Oh no, yeah, and so will I. So for number two, so then we're talking about this whole idea about leadership and self-awareness. Now the second question becomes values, Dr. Jean, because my thought process around values is it's our guiding light. It's how we make the easy decisions, and much more importantly, how we make those complex decisions. So
Mhm.
what are your three top values
For my organization or for myself?
for you?
So my values is basically comes down to a mission statement. I got to leave you better than I found you. That's it. Period. End of sentence. But I find that people, some people are like, I really love energy, or I love enthusiasm, or I like proactiveness, or I like integrity. Or to me, if I live my mission, I'm serving everybody that I need to. And it was interesting when I started my business. I hired a coach. And he said to me, like, what's your vision of your company? And I was like, well, to raise two happy, healthy, well-adjusted, model adult citizens who are financially independent from me, period. And he was like, well, that's not a vision for your company. I was like, yeah, well, this company serves these kids and these kids are going to serve these companies. So yes, but notice how I can just rattle that off. You
Right.
as a leader need to rattle things off just like that. And I find that a lot of companies have core values that don't do anything for leadership
And mean nothing.
and mean nothing. So
Yes.
as a leader, if you are the leader of the organization, then you need to have really good core values that are well defined that you hire, fire, promote, and reward on.
Hmm.
If you are a leader of a team in a division of an organization and the core values don't work for you, then create your own core values for your team that you are hiring, firing, rewarding, and promoting on. That makes sense for you. So, like for example, I was in a an EOS retreat with a team last week. And we've done their core values. One of the core values they have is yes, we are yes and. Yes
Hmm.
and. And so
Yes.
everything we talked about was, yes, I agree. And here's what's going to be. If you're a no but person, you're not fitting in on that team.
Yes. Correct. Yeah.
So as a leader, you really got to sit down and define what's important to you and be able to communicate that and get people to serve with you. And if they can't serve with you, then as Alan Malley, who is my favorite leader out of the favorite prime. For those of you who don't know, he is the former Ford CEO, came from Boeing. Look him up. He's got 9 principles of leadership, and he signs everything with a little Boeing plane. But one of his is love people out the door. And I think as leaders, we have to do a good job of loving people to the next place if they're not going to be with us. Yeah.
Well, and the whole thing, leave people better off than how you found them. That just sums it up. So that's perfect. Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you.
So the third question, what's the best advice you ever got from a leader? Best advice.
Oh gosh, there's been so many, there's been so many good advices. If I may,
You
this is
may.
not necessarily advice, but this is a story I'm going to tell. So
Okay.
when I worked in an organization, the last organization I worked in before I started my own company, I had the sister-in-law was my boss of the owner. Although it was a large company, it wasn't like there was 10 of us. And I had created my own job in her department. So she was doing compensation and benefits, and I had created my job to basically do everything but. So, any kind of HR work I was doing. And I remember her saying to me, now she could have been really, her brother-in-law put me into she could have been like, you are such a jerk. Why are you here? Like she could have really been very nasty about it.
Yeah.
But she sat down and she said to me, look, I will support everything and anything you do. Anything, anything you do, I will support. Even if I disagree with it, I will support you in public. And then I will talk to you in private about how you're going to do that different going forward. And to this day, what I say to my employees is I say, I can retrieve anything that you do except death. If you kill somebody, I can't help you. But I've made every mistake in this business. I've grown this business. So any mistake you make, I can retrieve it. Just don't kill anybody.
Yeah.
Right. And I think that, and it really comes back to Susan, this woman that I was working with, by telling me, like, I will support you in anything that you say up. And I can remember, and only once in like the 7 years I worked with her, was there something I did wrong that she talked to me about. But anyway, and I think that support as a leader to your people, it allows them to serve you and the organization and their jobs so much better because all the fear of I'm going to make a mistake, something's going to happen to me, I'm going to get fired goes away.
Exactly.
Yeah,
And the other thing is, yeah, the fear. The other part about that, though, is it's giving you some freedom to make a mistake. And there's no way innovation, creativity, next steps is ever going to happen if I'm afraid and I have to follow these rules and these standards of operation, because if I don't, I will, therefore, that kind of thing. It just allows people to really think bigger and differently and think about the possibilities.
I agree with that. I mean, when we were kids, we made mistake all the time. We called it learning.
Yeah.
Why is it as adults we can't make mistakes and call it learning? We make mistakes and we get fired.
Yeah.
Like so, right? I really don't understand the difference. And to me, I'm okay with people learning on my job because
Yeah.
that's how they get better.
Yes.
So I need to support learning and development so that people can grow with me and be able to serve the organization and the company.
Yeah. Good. Great. Love that. Okay. So the question number 4 is, we're currently going through an enormous amount of transition and change.
Really? I can't imagine.
So we won't go into that.
No,
However,
I think that we're always going through transition and change. And what's interesting is that we are actually going through an enormous transition and change through technology.
absolutely.
Enormous. And so many people have so many opinions on that change. And it's interesting because 10 years ago, I was listening to a person who was talking about the different 5 levels of technology of where we were going to be going. And I remember when I was like, when we get to number 5, are we like in Terminator, like kind of Skynet situation? Like, how's that going to happen? And
Yes.
we're in phase 3 of his. I mean, I don't know if it's what he came with truth, but based on what he taught me, we're in phase 3. So we got 2 more to go. I'm like,
Oh,
oh,
hold on,
hold on.
everybody. Hold
So,
on.
right, when I
So
say
how do you lead through this transition and
yeah,
change?
and I think the thing about being leaders is that we have to recognize that we are always leading through transition and change.
Mhm.
Always, always, always. There's never a time that we're resting on our laurels and it's not transition and change. That is our job, is to lead through transition and change. Because if we're not, we're going out of business. I always say there's 6 people who are happy where they are, status quo. 2 people are out of business because they didn't change when they needed to when they were sitting in the status quo, and 2 people are trying to get better and be innovative and stay on the cutting edge. Do not be in the status quo as a leader. You
Right.
have to always be growing and changing because, and then people say to me, well, no one likes change. I'm like, really? Did we have a cell phone? Did you have an iPad? Did you have did you have the internet? Like, right now we have AI. So my grandma used to say to me, she would say, always embrace the latest technology because that will always keep you on the cutting edge. And
I was going to say your grandma.
my grandma told me this. So my grandma at 104, she died at 104. So
Wow.
this was a while ago, but I mean, she had when answering machines came out, she had an answering machine. When the DVD player came out, she got a DVD player. She was about to get a computer. Like that's because she said you have to keep up with technology
Yeah.
in order to be able to do the things you need to do. Whereas my uncle was like, "Why do people walk around with these things in their ears like they're talking to them?" Like, oh, okay, well, you may not like it, but it helps you to be a leader. And I think the other thing is leaders, we have to learn from other people. And there's a vulnerability of we need to know everything, but the reality is we don't. So, mentor younger people and have younger people mentor you so that you can learn and grow and be a better leader around that. And I think the other thing in terms of transformation and change is again, is know who you are. Like
Yeah.
do an assessment. It's not a bad thing to get feedback. I mean, I think when you ask that, like I think back in college, I was in a conservatory program, and the head of the conservatory program, he sat me down. He was like, Jean, you are amazing at what you do, but you got to make sure that you're meeting people where they're at, and you got to give people other opportunities to grow too. And I was like, whoa. And I was in
Wow.
college.
Wow.
Yeah, right. Because I'm
Nice.
good at doing it all.
Yeah, exactly.
And however, my expectation is no one's ever going to do it as well as I am. No offense when I say that, but if they do it like 80% or they do it their 100%, that's probably just my 80%, and that's probably good enough.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly.
Right.
Yep.
So,
Again, it's allowing them to also be able to make some of those mistakes through the transition and change and to accept them because we all accept transition and change in different intervals and in different
yeah,
tiers. And sometimes, something will come along. You're like, yay, this best thing since that, sliced bread. And then the next thing comes along. You're like, what? I don't want to do that. So we have to, as we've been talking about, is meet people where they are. And it's also about self-awareness for ourselves. Yeah,
I would
definitely.
agree with that. And I will tell you that my husband's aunt once told me that she was like, your husband is the best thing since sliced bread. He hangs the stars and moons. And I always think to myself, there are people who you don't think are that great, but they all have an Aunt Joe in their life who think they hang the stars and the moons. And
Yeah.
your star is somebody else's dirt.
Yeah.
And their dirt is your star.
Yeah,
So the
absolutely.
fact is that the person, when they're not working for you, they're going to work someplace else much better.
Yes,
And,
exactly. Yeah.
right?
Well, then it goes back to the values and am I honoring who I am to work in an organization that will also honor who I am? Yeah.
Yeah. Right.
All right. Question number 5. We know the best leaders are curious and always learning. What tools and resources have you used to keep that growth and keep that development going for you? Because again, you think about your teams, you want them to grow and be curious. What about you, Jean?
So I have a learning and development budget that's 5 figures.
Oh, oh, nice.
Yes, it's a five. And interestingly enough, there's some NFL players that talk about their personal development budget, which is like $1 million. Well, they can afford it because they're making a gajillion dollars.
Yeah.
But the fact is that have a learning and development budget for yourself. And
Yeah.
look, yours in the beginning when I opened up my own when I opened up my own company, I had asked a friend who had opened up a company very similar to mine. I said, Tim, he was about 6 months ahead of me. And I said, what have you learned? And he said, what I learned was I should not have been I really should have been focused on sales growth. He said I was focused on leadership of my company, but it was just me to lead. So I really need to get new clients. But he also said, hire a coach. If I had hired a coach, I would have been so much farther down the line. And I've been coaching since the day, so 25 years, my company will be 25 years old in April. I've had a coach for 25 years. Now I've had different coaches,
Yes.
but the fact is that I would pay the coach before I paid myself. And whatever money I have invested, because usually I have to pay up first. So whatever
Yes.
money I invested in my coaching or in my development or my training or whatever it was, I made back at least tenfold.
Mhm.
And I see so many leaders who don't want to invest in themselves to learn and grow. They think hiring a coach means that there's something wrong with them. They think that being a part of an accountability partnership is, again, I can't hold myself accountable. We as human beings are terrible holding ourselves accountable. So get yourself an accountability partner. Be a part of a mastermind group. I mean, I've created lots of different mastermind groups, but right now I created a mastermind group with 6 other women there's five of us, so five other women. And we're all in different industries, represent different demographics. We've been together since 2019.
Nice.
Yep. So mastermind group. And I think the fact is that you can change, but if you're not investing in your personal development, like I got a master's degree, I got a PhD, I've gotten certificates. Learning and growing is super important. Make yourself a budget for it. And then don't think to yourself, oh my God, how can I pay this? As I said, there are times where I am so super broke and I was like, well, I'm still paying the coach.
Yeah, I mean, it becomes priorities in order to grow. So, you think about the short term versus the long term, and sometimes it's really hard to think about the long term in those moments. And I love learning and development budget. That sounds good to me.
Yeah. Have a learning and development budget.
So, number 6.
Yep.
So we talk about, we're talking about leadership the whole time. And what I continue to recognize is that if someone shows up at work, and I believe, Jean, and we've talked about this before, is that every single person is a leader. So I don't need people responsibilities to be a leader. I'm a leader in my own life.
I agree.
And so we have to show up whole. Everybody has to show up whole. So what piece of art or music or literature, whatever else keeps you balance and brings you joy? So joy is obviously the big word here. So what brings you joy so you show up whole?
So I have several things. I don't
Oh,
have
good.
just one thing.
Oh, good.
I'm a big reader. I read a tremendous amount and I read a lot of different types of things. I know there are people who can't read. So like my boyfriend listens to podcasting, listens to tremendous amount of different podcasts. And when I'm reading things, I think as leaders, we really have to connect the dots. I remember reading I was reading a book. I read an article from Harvard Business Review and I was reading People magazine. I was kind of reading them all at the same time. I have ADHD, so I get bored. So I have to like I'm sitting on a plane and all of a sudden I was like, oh my God, if I take this from this book and put it with this from this article and put it from this pleasure magazine, I can do this for my client and I could find the different connections.
Yeah.
So I think, like I watch movies in very different ways. Like I watch things from people's point of view. I want to know what makes them tick. Why is that way? So I'm highly curious.
Uh-huh.
Um, and I think that I also know when I'm depleted. So when I'm depleted, I know how to usually I tend to spend time just watching movies and lying in my bed because that's like
Yeah.
the best part is doing that. I don't get energy from going out and seeing lots of people. I really do. And I know when I need to recharge. At
Yes.
the end of the day, I think I went to school for theater management. So I run everything like a theater and like a theater production. So when I come to see you today, like I am Dr. Jean, the results queen. I am on. I'm playing my character. I'm wearing the clothes. But that is, I think a lot of people show up as themselves. And rather than thinking about like what is the character that I'm playing, and then I got this from Beyonce because Beyonce, when she's on stage, she's Sasha Fierce. She's
Yes.
not Beyonce. And Sasha Fierce is very different from Blue Ivy's mom.
Yeah.
So the idea is that we can play these different roles and be able to show up the best that we can be for that role and really think about that. So I think about things like things I read as a kid. I read this book from Anne of Green Gables. Like there's no, like today's the day with no mistakes in it yet. So
Mm,
like do my best, right?
nice.
Yeah. So I think, so there's different sayings that I say to myself. There's different music that I might listen to. There's different books that I'll read that all just fill me up to be able to bring joy. But at the end of the day, I will say it, a lot of it just comes down to my mission. Like I might have been, okay, this is not truth, but I might have been like, oh, I got to go do this podcast with Karen.
Oh,
And
that's definitely not
that's
true.
terrible, not true, right? But I might be like, okay, yeah,
I can
yeah,
do this.
I can do this, right? And I think a lot of us just show up. But
Yes.
really think about how you're showing up,
Yes.
because as leaders, people don't do what we say; they do what we do,
Absolutely.
right?
Absolutely.
They're watching us all the time as to how you're doing things. When you're off stage, you can be any way you want. But when you're on stage, really think about what that on stage presence is so that you are showing up to the highest and best for the people that are around you. Just saying.
Yeah, and I think it also sets such a good tone for other people to recognize that there are, you do have interests outside of just the work and that you're not doing the work, 24/7 and those kinds of things because we all need space. We all need our brains to recharge, rethink, be blank for a long time. There's nothing like a blank brain, so you can fill it back up again. So yeah, so I love.
There is research that says you cannot work 7 days a week. There's research that says you have to take a full day off and unplug from that. So no technology, like no business, no work, that you have to have a day off for your brain to rest in order for your brain to be able to do the things the other 6 days. So
Yeah,
rest one day, really, truth is research driven that it really does work. So I really I work to take off Saturdays.
yeah,
Saturday's my day off. Sometimes
yeah.
I start at noon on Friday. So like, because nothing good happens on Friday. Nothing does. No one's working on Friday. No good news comes on Friday afternoon. So by noon, 1 o'clock on Friday, like it's my team knows we're all off because
Yeah,
nothing
yeah,
good happens on Friday. So I actually, the other thing, there isn't. And
mhm,
that's the other thing, is that I give my team space. So
yeah,
like I say to them, we're closed at 1. I'm still paying them.
yeah.
Not right. And then there's mandated 2 weeks off in my vacation. Now, look, they can take vacation when they need to, but we close the office 4th of July week, and we close the office between Christmas and New Year's, because those are 2 times when everybody in the organization is resting. And I tell people, do not work. I don't want to see you. I don't want to hear from you. I don't want to know from you. Go away. And of course, take your vacation when you need to. But those are rest periods
Yes, yeah,
that we mandate in my organization.
yeah. You know, my grandmother, Nana B, used to take a rest period every afternoon. And as a kid, I was like, well, that seems crazy. And now when I think about it, I'm like, she was brilliant.
Yeah.
Brilliant. Because she needed to rest her brain. She had lots of kids, grandkids, grandpa, the whole thing. And I'm going to take a rest period. We will, like all the cousins be like, oh, okay, Nana. Okay, Nana. And she's brilliant. Obviously, she was brilliant.
I agree with that, because she's Nana. And listen, my grandma she'd rest her eyes.
Yeah. Okay.
She'd rest her eyes is what she'd say to me. But even like as kids, we had rest time,
Yes, of
and we
course.
hated rest time because we had so much to do. It was really about this.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. Well, Dr. Jean, thank you. Thank you so much for your insight and thoughts about leadership. And this is why I love my podcast, because you just never know what's going to happen. You never know what people are going to say. And I keep learning. So people will say to me, well, how do you learn? I don't know. I'll just do another podcast because I learned so much from everybody. I'm really, really grateful that you came on, and really, really grateful for all the wisdom that you have shown.
Oh, thanks so much for letting me pontificate a little bit about leadership. It's Karen, what you're doing is so important.
Thank you.
And really, I know there are lots of people like poo poo poo, but the reality is that we need to create great leaders. Great leaders are not born, they're created. And
Great.
your work is serving that purpose. So thank you.
Well, I really, really appreciate that. So,
Mhm.
to all the listeners, thank you for listening. And I'm Karen Colligan, and you've been listening to Dr. Jean Oursler, CEO of the Caveman Brain. And so, if this leadership podcast was of interest to you, of course, you can go to our YouTube channel and People Think New York and listen to all the distinguished leaders I've had the pleasure of interviewing. And you're going to learn so much about the uniqueness of leadership. I know I have. And don't forget to share with your colleagues. Till the next episode of the Let's Talk Leadership podcast, have a good one. And don't forget to keep it real. Editing by Mary Lee Williams. Thanks all. Have a good one. Bye now.